the time when only 1,280 prehistoric humans were left on Earth. A shadow falls across a shrinking world where ice-swept plains meet dense, whispering forests, and survival hangs by a thread. More than 70,000 years ago, humanity teetered on the brink only. 1,280 individuals remained, scattered across continents, each life a precious spark against extinction. Winds carried the scent of smoke from fragile fires, marking shelters that might not withstand the coming storms. Every hunt, every shared meal, every whispered lesson became a lifeline, a thread woven into the fragile tapestry of survival. Step into this world of scarcity and ingenuity, where the smallest choices bear the weight of our species' future. The last flicker of humanity. The wind swept across barren plains, carrying with it the scent of scorched earth and the distant tang of ice and salt from glacial rivers. In the fading light of a shrinking sun, humans moved cautiously, each step measured against the threats that lurked beyond sight. Across continents separated by seas and mountains, pockets of life clung to survival, their numbers so small that every loss carried the weight of potential extinction. Recent genetic analyses suggest that at this moment in prehistory, humanity had dwindled to approximately 1,280 individuals. A bottleneck so severe that the continuity of the species teetered on a knife's edge, vulnerable to storms, predators, or a single illness. Evidence from mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome studies paints a grim portrait. The genetic diversity of humans at this time was extraordinarily low, with a population split into tiny, isolated clans that had little opportunity to interbreed. The ramifications were profound, as small populations are more susceptible to inbreeding depression, which can increase the prevalence of deleterious alleles and reduce overall fitness. Anthropologists have traced modern human DNA to this bottleneck, revealing that almost every living person carries traces of this perilous survival period in their genome. Archaeological excavations across Africa, Europe, and Asia hint at the precarious conditions of this era. Stone tools, often crudely fashioned from flint or quartz, appear less varied than in prior periods, suggesting a population so limited that innovation slowed while survival became the paramount concern. Cave floors preserve faint traces of fire pits, charred bones, and small midden heaps, providing evidence that humans relied heavily on hunting the same local megafauna repeatedly. Bones of bison, aurochs, and steppe horses indicate frequent predation, while traces of mammoth remains hint at opportunistic scavenging rather than organized hunting, reflecting the limited manpower and resources available to these tiny groups. Paleo-environmental studies show that the climate during this period fluctuated dramatically, oscillating between glacial advances and retreating ice sheets. Temperatures dropped in some regions by as much as 5 degrees Celsius over a few centuries, creating harsh landscapes of tundra and steppe that constrained foraging opportunities. Pollen samples extracted from ancient sediment layers reveal a stark reduction in floral diversity, with many edible plant species disappearing or retreating to isolated refugia. These ecological pressures meant that the remaining humans had to develop acute knowledge of microhabitats, seasonal cycles, and migratory patterns of animals to survive. Their existence was dictated by environmental extremes that would have overwhelmed larger populations, far less reliant on precise adaptation. Fossilized footprints, unearthed in sedimentary deposits along river valleys, provide a fleeting yet poignant record of these humans in motion. The spacing and depth of prints suggest light frames and cautious movement, evidence that small groups traveled in tightly coordinated units to maximize safety. When humans were reduced to such a small number, every individual carried vital knowledge, who could find water during droughts, who remembered the location of hidden edible roots, who understood the behavior of apex predators. The loss of a single person was a catastrophic blow, not only biologically but culturally, erasing wisdom accumulated over generations and leaving gaps that could never easily be restored. Analysis of ancient bones reveals other facets of survival. Isotopic studies of skeletal remains indicate a diet heavily reliant on protein from large mammals, supplemented by seasonal fruits, nuts, and tubers, but with little consistency in nutrient intake. Skeletal stress markers and healed fractures point to the constant physical strain of life in a fragile population, where injuries carried greater risk than they would in larger communities, as the group could scarcely afford the loss of a hunter or caretaker. The patterns of wear on teeth suggest the inclusion of gritty, fibrous vegetation, possibly gathered from marginal lands, highlighting the delicate balance between necessity and available resources. Compounding environmental and physical challenges were pathogens and parasites, which could sweep through isolated groups with devastating efficiency. Evidence of parasitic infection in preserved human remains indicates that even a small population was not immune to disease. Limited genetic diversity amplified susceptibility, meaning that even minor outbreaks could ripple across distant clans, leaving entire groups depopulated. Yet, even amid this vulnerability, humans displayed remarkable adaptability. Archaeological data show subtle innovations in tool use, evidence of controlled fire, and traces of structured shelters within caves or rock overhangs. Hearths were maintained with consistent attention, and their spatial arrangement suggests a nascent understanding of safety, comfort, and communal life. Genetic modeling indicates that humans may have strategically dispersed to minimize inbreeding, deliberately seeking neighboring groups while maintaining critical knowledge of routes, landmarks, and resource locations. This combination of ingenuity and careful risk management exemplifies a species aware of its fragility and capable of deliberate planning to avert total collapse. The fossil record also hints at early symbolic behavior that may have served to reinforce cohesion within these minute populations. Engravings on bones, ochre marks on stone, and pigment traces in cave recesses suggest that humans sought not only physical survival, but cultural anchoring, a psychological strategy that provided meaning in a world that offered little certainty. Such expressions may have functioned to encode knowledge about hunting, seasonal cycles, or social rules, creating an intangible network of information and ritual that strengthened the fragile threads binding clans together. By examining this period through a combination of genetics, archaeology, and paleo-environmental reconstruction, it becomes clear that humanity's survival was contingent on a delicate interplay of biology, behavior, and environment. Every decision carried weight, and every action was measured against the potential for irrevocable loss. The awareness of scarcity shaped everything: movement, social structure, diet, and even the ways humans conceived of themselves in relation to the world around them. In the dim light of prehistory, these scattered humans walked landscapes of towering glaciers, sprawling grasslands, and dense forests teeming with predators, navigating each day with a mixture of instinct and knowledge honed over millennia. Their survival depended not only on skill and courage, but on an intimate understanding of the rhythms of the earth itself: where to find water when rivers froze, how to predict herd movements, which plants were safe to eat, and how to shelter from storms that could erase entire clans in a single night. From the sheer fragility of their numbers, life demanded constant vigilance, and yet, in that vigilance, humans displayed remarkable ingenuity and resilience. It is within this tension between vulnerability and adaptation that the story of their daily struggle begins. A story written not just in bones and stones, but in the landscapes that shaped their every choice and the hidden corridors where the last flickers of humanity persevered. Land of giants and shadows. Shadows stretched across frozen plains, where the distant roar of beasts signaled a world that did not bend to human will. Every movement required vigilance, for the landscape was alive with massive creatures whose weight could shatter earth and whose predatory instincts made every misstep fatal. Saber-toothed cats slinked through depressions in the snow, their elongated canines hidden beneath silent muzzles, while cave lions, larger than any modern feline, patrolled the edges of open grasslands with an unhurried menace. Humans, fragile in comparison, navigated these territories with an awareness sharpened by both fear and necessity, learning to read footprints, broken branches, and subtle disturbances in vegetation to anticipate the presence of predators. Jagged cliffs and dense thickets hid movements both predator and prey, offering opportunity and peril in equal measure. Archaeological traces suggest that humans chose routes that maximized cover while minimizing exposure, often hugging the base of rocky outcrops or winding through marshy patches where large predators found footing difficult. Modern reconstructions of these behaviors indicate that even small groups of humans could influence the movements of dangerous animals, using strategic positioning, noise, and fire to divert attention or create safe corridors. The dance between hunter and hunted was no longer simply about food. It was a delicate negotiation with creatures far larger and stronger, whose own survival instincts mirrored those of humans in their urgency and cunning. The colossal footprints of mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses etched into mud revealed both their presence and the constant spatial negotiation required of humans. These herds moved predictably along river valleys and grasslands, and their migrations dictated human mobility, forcing small clans to adjust hunting strategies, sheltering locations, and even social interactions. Fossilized dung layers and pollen analysis suggest that early humans had become acute observers of these megafauna movements, timing their travel to avoid conflict while exploiting secondary resources, such as scavenging carcasses or harvesting plants trampled and exposed by the passage of massive herds. The rhythm of human survival was inseparable from the rhythms of the giants surrounding them. Muscles coiled, eyes scanned, and breath caught as hunters gauged the approach of a saber-toothed predator, whose silence belied its immense strength. The bones of Smilodon found across Eurasia indicate jaw musculature capable of delivering lethal bites to prey far larger than themselves, while their social hunting strategies suggest that humans might have encountered coordinated ambushes, especially near watering holes. Evidence from wear patterns on human stone tools shows an increasing emphasis on precision cutting and thrusting points, implying adaptations in hunting and self-defense developed in direct response to the persistent threat of apex predators. Survival demanded a constant combination of observation, anticipation, and strategic movement, as each encounter could mean life or death. Waterholes, once lifelines, became arenas of tension, where humans shared the landscape with wolves, hyenas, and transient herds of bison. Paleontological reconstructions reveal complex ecological networks around these sites. Predators traveled predictable routes, herbivores clustered strategically, and humans often arrived during times of reduced predator activity. Observing the behaviors of multiple species allowed humans to exploit knowledge networks encoded in the landscape itself, when to drink, where to camp, and how to avoid confrontation. Even a momentary lapse in vigilance could leave a hunter or gatherer vulnerable, underscoring the delicate calculus that dictated every step, glance, and decision. A fallen tree or rocky outcrop could provide momentary refuge, yet the calculus of risk never allowed complacency, demanding continuous attention to terrain and timing. Stratigraphic studies of shelter sites suggest humans often reused natural depressions, balancing safety with proximity to food sources. These microhabitats offered not only protection from predators, but also strategic vantage points for observation, allowing humans to anticipate the approach of herds or the stealthy movements of carnivores. In these temporary sanctuaries, survival was negotiated on a scale both intimate and vast, each choice echoing the precarious balance of life in a world dominated by giants. Patterns emerged in the chaos. Predators favored certain routes. Herds migrated predictably, and humans learned to interpret subtle environmental signals to anticipate encounters. Fossil trackways show repeated predator paths, while pollen cores indicate seasonal plant growth that influenced herbivore distribution. Humans applied this knowledge tactically, timing their movements to coincide with reduced predator activity or to take advantage of resource availability. This pattern recognition was not merely instinct. It was early ecological intelligence, a merging of observation, memory, and decision-making that allowed a fragile species to survive amidst formidable challenges. Nightfall transformed the familiar into a treacherous realm, shadows lengthening as predators hunted under the cloak of darkness, and humans relied on learned vigilance to navigate uncertainty. Torches of resin-soaked branches, when available, provided a fragile halo of safety, illuminating tracks, burrows, and potential threats. The interplay of light and darkness shaped human behavior, influencing group cohesion, sleeping arrangements, and patrol patterns. Archaeological evidence of hearth placement within caves suggests that humans strategically positioned fires to create defensible zones, blending caution with necessity in an environment that punished errors with brutal efficiency. Teeth, claws, and tusks were constant reminders that humans occupied the lower end of a brutal hierarchy, and yet their ingenuity, strategic positioning, fire, and cooperative movement allowed them to endure. Skeletal analysis of human remains from this period indicates strong, lean musculature, shaped by relentless activity and the necessity of agile movement. Wear patterns on limb bones reveal long-distance travel over uneven terrain and repeated defensive actions, demonstrating that survival required both physical resilience and the mental acuity to predict, evade, and sometimes confront predators. The tension between vulnerability and adaptability defined existence, forging a species capable of extraordinary endurance. As dawn returned, the landscape seemed less threatening, yet every scar in the earth and broken branch whispered of past encounters, shaping the next day's cautious journey. Megafauna continued their migrations. Predators resumed their patrols, and humans recalibrated strategies based on accumulated knowledge of recent encounters. This continuous feedback loop, observation, interpretation, adaptation, became the foundation of survival, guiding the movement, cooperation, and decision-making of a species whose numbers were perilously small, but whose capacity for ingenuity remained immense. In this world of colossal shadows and ever-present danger, humans began to master not the giants themselves, but the patterns, rhythms, and subtle cues that allowed them to coexist, to feed, and to endure. From this intimate, dangerous communion with the Earth's largest creatures, the story of sustenance and survival emerges, a precursor to the delicate balance of life that would define every day of their existence. Hunting in the last wilds. First light cut through the morning mist, revealing the faint outlines of a distant bison herd moving across the plains. The humans, fragile in number, yet honed by necessity, moved with deliberate caution, their eyes scanning every undulation in the grass and every subtle movement in the shadows. These hunts were more than acts of survival. They were intricate dances of coordination, patience, and precision, where every motion carried weight and every decision could mean life or death. Archaeological evidence, including finely worked spear points and bone knives, shows that even small groups executed complex strategies to intercept, flank, and ultimately subdue animals far larger and stronger than themselves. Each hunter adjusted position silently, muscles coiled like drawn springs, senses tuned to the faintest sound or vibration in the ground. Studies of fossilized footprints alongside prey remains suggest that human groups relied on subtle spatial understanding, moving in patterns that anticipated herd trajectories. Tracks preserved in ancient mud reveal repeated strategies, circling flanks, gradual approaches, and synchronized attacks that minimized risk while maximizing efficiency. Such methods required not only acute observation, but an intimate knowledge of prey anatomy, behavior, and seasonal patterns, demonstrating that survival demanded intelligence as much as physical strength. Spears tipped with flint caught glints of sunlight as they were readied for launch, instruments of both sustenance and ritualized expression. Use-wear analysis of projectile points indicates a surprising level of craftsmanship. Edges shaped for penetration, hafting systems designed for durability, and balance optimized for both thrusting and throwing. This technical sophistication, emerging from a population of merely 1,280, underscores how necessity drives innovation. Each tool carried the accumulated knowledge of generations, embodying lessons in mechanics, animal physiology, and survival instinct that were impossible to replace if lost. The cracking of a twig underfoot could mean disaster, reinforcing the importance of stealth and patience. Ethnographic parallels suggest that even minor errors during a hunt could trigger stampedes, alert predators, or compromise group safety. Fossilized animal remains with cut marks and fracture patterns reveal the precision required to immobilize large prey, while studies of hunting injuries indicate that humans accepted calculated risks, balancing speed, strength, and timing with an awareness of environmental hazards. In this way, every hunt became a high-stakes classroom where knowledge and instinct intertwined. Communication took myriad forms: whispered gestures, patterned sounds, and subtle positioning of bodies to coordinate attacks. Observations of modern hunter-gatherer societies, combined with spatial analysis of prehistoric camp layouts, suggest that humans developed complex systems of non-verbal signaling to coordinate movements and anticipate each other's actions. These exchanges were not merely functional, they reinforced social cohesion, teaching younger members the protocols and hierarchies essential for survival. Cooperative hunting thus operated as both a means of obtaining food and as a mechanism for passing knowledge, strengthening fragile social bonds within a tiny population. Traces of blood on stones or mud provided immediate feedback, guiding pursuit strategies while conserving energy. Taphonomic studies reveal that prehistoric humans assessed kills in real time, redirecting efforts to focus on weaker or isolated individuals, and adjusting tactics based on animal behavior. The distribution of butchery marks across skeletal remains indicates careful planning, maximizing meat, marrow, and hide while minimizing waste. This methodical approach demonstrates that hunting was an intellectual as well as physical endeavor, combining ecological awareness with foresight and adaptability. Bones fractured with precision, revealing knowledge of anatomy that extended beyond immediate survival. Marrow extraction techniques, evidenced by microstriation analysis, provided critical calories, while cuts on joints and muscle attachments indicate strategic dismemberment to facilitate transport and consumption. Nutritional reconstructions based on isotopic analysis suggest that marrow and organ tissues formed vital sources of fat and protein, essential to sustain small human populations whose caloric needs could not tolerate waste. Each act of butchery thus reflected a deep understanding of both biology and environmental constraints. Hunt sequences were often punctuated by quiet pauses, moments when the group reassessed, adjusted, and re-established unspoken hierarchies. Archaeological and ethnographic records indicate that such pauses reinforced leadership structures, distributed roles, and maintained group cohesion. These interludes were opportunities to observe predator presence, monitor herd movement, and communicate silently through gestures or glance actions that required vigilance, trust, and shared experience. Within these pauses, humans exercised judgment honed over countless hunts, learning to anticipate not only prey behavior, but environmental contingencies that could tip the balance between life and death. Even failure carried lessons, recorded not in writing, but through memory, repetition, and mentorship. Experimental archaeology demonstrates that unsuccessful hunts contributed to cumulative knowledge. Which approaches failed, how terrain influenced animal movement, and which group configurations were least effective. Elders and skilled hunters likely transmitted these insights orally and through demonstration, ensuring that errors did not lead to catastrophe and that survival techniques evolved across generations. This iterative learning process exemplifies the adaptive intelligence that allowed a species of only 1,000 individuals to endure a perilous world. With the sun climbing higher, prey secured and tools cleaned, humans carried not only nourishment but reaffirmation of social bonds and survival skills. The distribution of food, the sharing of meat, and the maintenance of tools all reinforced interdependence, sustaining both body and community. Through each hunt, humans preserved knowledge of the land, the animals, and each other, embedding survival strategies into the cultural fabric that would define daily life for centuries to come. In mastering these hunts, they transformed necessity into ritual, danger into learning, and scarcity into a crucible of ingenuity. From the plains where giants roamed and predators stalked, the next challenge emerged: constructing shelters, organizing domestic spaces, and enduring the unforgiving climates that shaped every aspect of human existence. Shelters against time. When dusk fell, humans clustered around makeshift dwellings, each structure a testament to ingenuity amid scarcity. Timber and bone, lashed together with plant fibers, formed delicate frameworks that swayed under the wind, yet held firm against the cold, rain, and threat of prowling predators. Even in their small numbers, humans understood that survival demanded more than muscle and vigilance. It required shaping the environment itself into spaces that could protect, sustain, and enable life. Excavations of ancient campsite layers reveal patterns of construction that suggest deliberate planning, with interior arrangements that balanced warmth, accessibility, and observation, demonstrating an early mastery of spatial organization. Timber, bone, and layered foliage form the skeleton of each dwelling, chosen for strength, flexibility, and local availability. Archaeological studies of post holes and associated debris indicate that early humans selected materials that could bend without breaking, combining them with insulating layers of moss, grass, or animal hides to resist the biting cold. Hearth, carefully positioned at the center, radiated warmth while minimizing smoke accumulation, and stones placed strategically along perimeters acted as anchors and windbreaks. These adaptations reveal that even ephemeral shelters were engineered with careful attention to physics, material properties, and environmental dynamics. Hearth glowed in the center of each shelter, radiating not only heat but a sense of communal focus. The placement of fire pits within wind-protected recesses reflects an intuitive understanding of airflow and combustion, ensuring warmth without suffocating smoke. Charcoal layers preserved in soil strata provide evidence of repeated hearth use, indicating that humans maintained these fires over extended periods, adapting fuel choices to seasonal availability. Beyond warmth, fires served as gathering points, facilitating the sharing of food, knowledge, and stories, transforming shelters from mere physical protection into hubs of social and cognitive activity. Post holes and rock placements preserved in the sedimentary record reveal careful planning, ensuring stability while optimizing interior space. Structures ranged from simple lean-tos to more elaborate frameworks, capable of supporting heavier insulation and extended occupancy. Some sites show evidence of overlapping construction phases, where new generations reinforced or modified existing shelters to accommodate changing conditions or community size. This continuity suggests an early form of architectural memory, with lessons embedded in material and design passed across decades, preserving both ingenuity and cultural knowledge. Leaves, grasses, and moss lined the floors, providing insulation against the frozen ground and damp. Microstratigraphic analysis of sediment layers indicates deliberate selection of materials that retained heat, repelled moisture, and resisted decay, offering a subtle form of climate control within these fragile dwellings. The tactile and sensory aspects of these insulating layers also suggest that humans considered comfort and ergonomics, refining shelters to accommodate both survival needs and the physical limitations of their bodies after long, strenuous days of hunting and gathering. Small openings acted as vents and observation points, allowing humans to monitor the surrounding landscape without exposing themselves to danger. These apertures, often just a few centimeters wide, demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of visibility, predator behavior, and environmental awareness. Comparative studies of modern hunter-gatherer shelters reveal that such design choices enhanced early warning capabilities, enabling humans to plan movements, anticipate animal migrations, and avoid predation. Shelter construction, therefore, was not only defensive but anticipatory, integrating foresight and strategic thinking into the very bones of the structure. Fragile though these constructions were, they embodied collective memory, with each repair or modification reflecting lessons passed down through generations. Wear patterns on reused posts and hide coverings indicate an iterative approach to maintenance, where structures evolved to meet environmental challenges and shifting human needs. Evidence of multiple construction phases at the same site shows that knowledge of material behavior, load-bearing, and insulation was continuously refined, suggesting that engineering skill was encoded socially, transmitted through demonstration, practice, and shared problem-solving. Evidence of repeated occupation and site reuse shows humans strategically selecting locations with access to water, game, and defensive terrain. Sediment analysis, pollen cores, and faunal remains confirm that these shelters were positioned to optimize survival, blending environmental observation with practical design. Human choices reflect an early form of ecological engineering, where temporary structures were integrated into broader landscapes, facilitating resource management, seasonal movement, and risk mitigation without the luxury of permanent edifices. Wind howled outside, but inside, humans maintained a delicate balance between comfort, safety, and proximity to essential resources. Hearths, insulation, and careful orientation transformed fragile shelters into livable microcosms, where survival depended as much on human ingenuity as on environmental conditions. The interplay between structural fragility and functional resilience illustrates how early humans imposed order on a chaotic world, harnessing knowledge, cooperation, and experience to convert vulnerability into stability. The selection of construction materials also reveals the earliest hints of ecological knowledge. Stones collected from riverbeds, carefully chosen for weight and shape, anchored structures against gusts and shifting soil, while pliable branches, woven together with sinew or vine, absorbed the shocks of wind and snow. Analyses of wear patterns on these materials suggest repeated testing and refinement, indicating that humans engaged in practical experimentation, trial and error, as a formalized approach to survival engineering. Even subtle differences in branch diameter or hide thickness could mean the difference between shelter collapse and continued protection. In these shelters, survival extended beyond the physical, embedding knowledge, cooperation, and foresight into the very walls that cradled their fragile existence. Each stick, hide, and layer of moss carried the wisdom of elders, the experimentation of predecessors, and the adaptive intelligence of a species learning to endure in extremis. Shelters became extensions of social networks, spaces where skills were taught, strategies rehearsed, and communal bonds reinforced. From the fragile frameworks that shielded bodies against storms and predators, the invisible architecture of culture and shared understanding began to emerge, laying the foundation for cohesion, memory, and resilience that would define human life far beyond the immediate challenge of survival. Even in moments of calm, the shelters served as laboratories of innovation, where humans observed, recorded mentally, and refined their approaches to balance weight, insulation, and access. Soil microlayers show repeated fire management, suggesting that ventilation, airflow, and fuel types were carefully considered to maximize comfort and safety. The integration of these practical lessons into daily routines reinforced survival strategies, creating a continuous feedback loop of observation, testing, and adaptation that extended the species' capacity to endure both climate extremes and predator threats. The language of survival. Fingers traced patterns in the soil, outlining paths to water, game, and shelter that would guide others across the rugged landscape. These marks were more than simple instructions. They were a tangible record of accumulated knowledge, translating memory into a visual language accessible to all members of the small human group. Archaeological studies of incised stones and ochre markings suggest that early humans used such techniques to encode spatial information, creating a shared cognitive map that allowed them to navigate vast and unpredictable environments. In these moments, survival became a collective endeavor, reliant not merely on instinct, but on the ability to transfer understanding across eyes, hands, and minds. Low, guttural sounds carried across the wind, announcing the approach of predators or signaling the movement of distant herds. Ethnographic parallels show that vocalizations served as early alarm systems, finely tuned to frequency and volume to convey urgency without revealing the group's exact location. Fossilized hyoid bones indicate that humans possess the anatomical capacity for complex articulation, enabling a range of sounds that could encode meaning, emotion, and instruction. Each call was a link between the individual and the community, transforming isolated action into coordinated effort and reinforcing the invisible threads of cooperation. Echoes of vocal calls intertwined with gestures, forming an intricate choreography of communication that required observation, memory, and anticipation. Hands lifted, heads tilted, and eyes darted, transmitting subtleties, invisible to outsiders, but unmistakable to those trained in the language of the group. Analysis of gesture systems in modern hunter-gatherers suggests that these movements were highly structured, often following consistent conventions that allowed for rapid learning and minimal error during complex tasks such as hunting or foraging. Within this fluid interplay of sound and motion, humans codified strategy and shared experience, embedding knowledge directly into social practice. Symbols etched into rock faces hinted at stories, warnings, and lessons passed across seasons. Cave walls in distant archaeological sites reveal sequences of marks, often associated with animal depictions or hunting scenes, suggesting an emerging symbolic literacy. These early narratives were not merely decorative. They encoded strategies for survival, transmitting behavioral patterns that could be learned even by individuals absent from the original events. Through this form of proto-writing, humans externalized memory, ensuring that experience survived beyond the lifespan of a single individual, and strengthening the cohesion of the small population. Shared laughter and cries around the hearth conveyed nuance, emotion, and social information that words alone could not carry. Vocal inflection, tone, and rhythm allowed subtle distinctions between alarm, excitement, encouragement, or reassurance. Neurocognitive research supports the idea that such auditory signals reinforced empathy and social understanding, crucial components in groups whose survival depended on cooperation and trust. The interplay between vocalizations and communal activity deepened bonds, establishing a foundation of social intelligence that extended beyond immediate practical needs. Repetitive chants and mimicked animal calls trained younger humans to recognize patterns, anticipate behavior, and participate in coordinated action. Experimental archaeology demonstrates that imitation and repetition were central to learning, allowing juveniles to internalize survival techniques without direct risk. Through these exercises, humans honed memory, attention, and predictive reasoning, gradually constructing a mental framework for understanding the behaviors of both prey and predators. Communication became simultaneously pedagogical and adaptive, blending instruction with the rehearsal of instinctive responses. The positioning of hands, stones, and tools often acted as non-verbal instruction, guiding tasks with precision and efficiency. For example, the alignment of spears or the placement of markers along a hunting route conveyed strategic information that could be interpreted without sound, reducing the risk of detection by predators or prey. Tactile signals and environmental cues were integrated seamlessly into daily practice, demonstrating that communication extended far beyond spoken language, relying on spatial reasoning, memory, and shared conventions. Early narrative forms emerged, where sequences of sound, motion, and mark-making encoded lessons in survival, ritual, and kinship. These proto-stories were not linear in the modern sense, but were structured around patterns and relationships observable in the environment, from animal behavior to seasonal cycles. Cognitive studies suggest that such storytelling strengthened causal reasoning, problem-solving, and future planning, allowing humans to predict outcomes and refine strategies collaboratively. By weaving practical knowledge into narrative frameworks, humans transformed experience into a portable, teachable, and enduring form of intelligence. Even silence was purposeful, serving as a tool to signal caution, attention, or deference within the fragile group. Pauses in vocalization or motion conveyed as much information as sound, creating a dynamic equilibrium between action and observation. Ethological studies indicate that strategic silence could alert others to threats, coordinate stealth approaches during hunting, or reinforce hierarchical roles without confrontation. Mastery of both speech and silence reflected a sophisticated understanding of environmental, social, and cognitive variables, underscoring the complexity of communication as a survival mechanism. By weaving gestures, sounds, and symbols into daily routines, humans forged a shared identity that transcended the immediacy of survival. Communication became a vessel for cultural memory, social norms, and collective wisdom, binding individuals into a cohesive unit capable of navigating an unpredictable and often hostile world. Archaeological and anatomical evidence together suggest that these early communication systems were dynamic, adaptive, and integral to human endurance, providing the framework upon which kinship, ritual, and social cohesion would grow. The echoes of these early words and signals resonated far beyond the moment, laying the foundation for traditions, storytelling, and knowledge transfer that would ensure not only survival but the persistence of human culture itself. Kinship and clans. People huddled close together, their bodies touching for warmth, safety, and mutual understanding. In these fragile communities, every gesture carried weight, and every action was observed, learned, and remembered. Archaeological evidence from hearth sites and living floors suggests that early humans clustered together not only for warmth, but to maintain social cohesion, ensuring that knowledge, skills, and traditions could survive alongside the bodies of those who carried them. Small group size dictated the rhythms of daily life. Hunting, foraging, and shelter maintenance were coordinated with precision, relying on trust and mutual dependence to sustain a population whose survival rested on cohesion more than numbers. Shared meals passed silently from hand to hand, reinforcing both hierarchy and trust. Faunal remains indicate carefully distributed portions, with elders and skilled hunters often deciding who received protein-rich cuts to balance nourishment and social standing. Such patterns highlight early systems of fairness and reciprocity, as every member's survival depended on the judicious allocation of scarce resources. Nutritional strategies were inseparable from social rules, revealing that cooperation, observation, and memory were as critical to survival as speed, strength, or intelligence. Murmurs and gestures regulated mating, alliances, and the delicate balance of clan cohesion. Genetic studies of bottleneck populations show that even within extremely small groups, humans maintained enough diversity to avoid catastrophic inbreeding, suggesting intentional mate selection and the recognition of kinship boundaries. Observations of modern hunter-gatherers support this, demonstrating that mate choice was often mediated by social norms, ritualized consent, and long-term observation rather than chance. In these micro-societies, the very act of pairing became a regulated strategy, preserving genetic health alongside social stability. Elders guided the young, teaching memory, observation, and ritual through repetition and demonstration. Stone tools, fire management, and food preparation were not simply discovered, they were meticulously transmitted through hands-on instruction, storytelling, and modeled behavior. Archaeological sites preserve wear patterns on tools and traces of repeated tasks, suggesting that learning was communal and iterative. This careful mentorship ensured that every generation acquired not only technical skill, but an understanding of the group's history, strategies, and survival philosophy, embedding cultural memory within the body and mind of each individual. Every cooperative act, from hunting to shelter repair, solidified the invisible framework of loyalty and obligation. Ethnographic parallels show that shared labor was codified through unspoken rules, ritualized participation, and reinforcement of hierarchy, allowing fragile populations to function as cohesive units. Successful hunts depended on precise coordination. Shelters could not be constructed or maintained without trust and shared responsibility. These collective behaviors were rehearsed and refined, creating patterns of interdependence that became a cornerstone of human resilience in the face of environmental unpredictability. Disputes arose quietly, resolved through established norms, signaling an early form of social governance. Evidence from site stratigraphy and material remains indicates that individuals who violated cooperative expectations risked exclusion or reduced access to resources, while those who contributed disproportionately gained influence and authority. Such mechanisms of conflict resolution highlight the evolutionary importance of reputation, reciprocity, and reputation management, demonstrating that even in the most precarious moments, humans relied on structured social strategies to mitigate risk and maintain group survival. Genetic bottleneck studies suggest these small groups maintained both diversity and stability despite isolation. Analysis of mitochondrial and nuclear DNA reveals that, although populations were perilously small, mechanisms of mate exchange, occasional migration, and kin selection preserved enough variability to allow adaptation to changing climates and predation pressures. This interplay of biological necessity and social enforcement shows that kinship networks were not merely cultural artifacts, they were active agents in the survival of the species, guiding both reproduction and cooperation. Patterns of tool use and resource allocation reflect deliberate decisions informed by kinship and clan strategy. Flint knapping debris, faunal butchery marks, and hearth placements reveal that tasks were assigned according to experience, strength, and social status. Young learners observed and assisted, elders supervised, and hunters collaborated to ensure maximum efficiency. These choices were informed by memory, communication, and social understanding, illustrating that the distribution of labor was inseparable from both survival and social cohesion. Initiation rites and symbolic gestures encoded values, creating cohesion that extended beyond immediate survival. Rock carvings, ochre markings, and ritual deposits suggest early humans celebrated transitions, birth, puberty, mating eligibility, and hunting skill with communal participation. These acts reinforced alliances, established roles, and taught norms in a way that combined emotion, observation, and repetition. Through ritual, abstract knowledge and social expectations were made tangible, embedding cultural continuity directly into the lived experience of each clan member. In these intimate networks, the human capacity for foresight, empathy, and collaboration reached its earliest and most crucial expression. Trust, shared responsibility, and coordinated action allowed fragile groups to endure climatic extremes, predation, and scarcity. Every gesture, word, and pattern of movement was an investment in collective survival, creating invisible bonds that were as vital as food, fire, or shelter. The cumulative effect of these tightly woven relationships transformed vulnerability into resilience, establishing a foundation upon which early humans could innovate, learn, and ultimately thrive despite their precarious numbers. Through careful observation, learned behavior, and structured social norms, humans forged bonds that transcended mere survival. Clans became repositories of knowledge, guardians of memory, and engines of adaptation, translating intimate cooperation into long-term advantage. Within this framework, individuals understood not only their own needs, but the interdependence that defined life, ensuring that the smallest acts, sharing a morsel of food, offering instruction, or observing ritual, resonated across the group. From these kinship structures emerged stability, foresight, and a platform for innovation, laying the groundwork for mastery of fire, tools, and the broader environment, which would become the next defining challenge in humanity's delicate ascent. Fire, the element of mastery. Sparks caught dry tinder, and the first flames licked upward, casting trembling shadows across the faces of the small group. The glow illuminated eyes wide with curiosity and caution, reflecting both awe and understanding. Archaeological studies reveal that controlled fire use dates back hundreds of thousands of years, with hearths, charcoal deposits, and burned bones providing evidence of repeated, deliberate ignition. In this fragile population, fire was more than warmth. It was a lifeline, a constant companion against the encroaching darkness, allowing humans to extend their presence beyond the safety of daylight and to reshape the patterns of daily survival. Smoke curled into the twilight sky, carrying the scent of wood, warmth, and protection across the open plain. Ethnographic analogues demonstrate that early humans recognized the strategic value of smoke, dispersing insects, signaling location to distant kin, and subtly warning predators of an occupied territory. Hearth placement was not random. It reflected an intuitive understanding of wind direction, resource access, and spatial organization, maximizing both safety and utility. Each controlled fire became a hub of knowledge transfer, observation, and experimentation, a focal point around which daily life and learning revolved. Flames illuminated patterns of behavior, revealing the subtle choreography of cooking, storytelling, and vigilance. Bones roasted over embers show precise timing, temperature control, and the selection of cuts to optimize nutrient yield. The advent of cooking transformed diets, softening fibrous plant material, denaturing proteins, and enhancing caloric availability, all critical for small populations with limited access to abundant food. Studies suggest that the ability to extract more energy from cooked food directly supported cognitive growth, enabling the development of complex social structures, planning, and teaching. The heat of fire altered diets, softening fibers and breaking down toxins that would otherwise have limited food choices. Analysis of dental wear patterns indicates that prehistoric humans experienced reduced mechanical stress on jaws and teeth once cooking became a consistent practice, reflecting profound physiological adaptation. Caloric efficiency increased, allowing energy to be redirected toward brain development, long-distance travel, and extended periods of social activity. Fire, in this sense, was not merely a convenience, it was a transformative agent, reshaping bodies and minds alike. Ashes and charcoal fragments tell the story of controlled burning, hearth placement, and repeated use across generations. Radiocarbon dating from multiple sites confirms continuity of use, suggesting that knowledge of fire maintenance, fuel selection, and combustion management was carefully transmitted. Some hearths reveal evidence of selective wood types, reflecting an understanding of caloric output, smoke density, and ease of ignition. These practices demonstrate an early form of engineering where empirical observation informed technological refinement over decades, linking cognition directly to survival strategy. Predators kept at bay by the glow allowed humans to rest, observe, and teach without the constant threat of night ambush. Bones gnawed by hyenas or leopards show reduced frequency near hearths, highlighting the protective radius afforded by firelight. In this expanded temporal window, humans could engage in activities previously constrained by darkness, refining tools, planning hunting strategies, or imparting vital survival knowledge to younger members. Fire acted as both shield and stage, extending agency into periods that would otherwise be consumed by vigilance or fear. Firelight extended the day, providing temporal expansion for reflection, planning, and ritual activities. Archaeological traces suggest that communal gatherings around hearths were structured with attention to proximity, hierarchy, and participation. Storytelling, demonstration of skills, and rehearsal of hunting techniques took place in these luminous circles, embedding procedural knowledge into memory. This nocturnal extension facilitated cognitive rehearsal, reinforcing patterns of observation, anticipation, and problem-solving that became increasingly sophisticated with each generation. The manipulation of flame revealed early problem-solving, experimentation with materials, and selective feeding strategies. Humans tested various ignition methods, from friction to sparks, and assessed fuel types for burn rate and temperature, displaying iterative reasoning akin to modern engineering thought. Cooked food was not simply consumed, it was evaluated, rationed, and prepared with foresight, reflecting an understanding of cause, effect, and optimization. Through these practices, fire became both laboratory and teacher, cultivating skill, patience, and predictive cognition. Physiological adaptations, including reduced chewing force and enhanced caloric efficiency, were facilitated by the advent of cooking. Comparative studies of pre- and post-fire archaeological remains reveal significant differences in skeletal robustness and digestive tract morphology, suggesting that fire directly influenced human anatomy. Beyond nutrition, the communal management of fire fostered synchronization of activity, coordination of labor, and reinforcement of social bonds, embedding survival strategies within both body and society. Fire became the nexus where biology, behavior, and culture converged, shaping humans into organisms capable of enduring extreme scarcity and environmental unpredictability. Fire also transformed perception and cognition. Observing flames required focus, predicting burn duration and intensity demanded anticipation, and manipulating embers called for dexterity and timing. Neuroarchaeological studies suggest that engagement with fire may have stimulated areas of the brain responsible for planning, abstract thought, and social coordination. Nights spent tending hearths were periods of concentrated learning, where story, instruction, and experimentation merged, creating a cognitive landscape as vivid and intricate as the dancing shadows cast on the walls. In mastering fire, humans reshaped perception, cognition, and the very rhythm of life. Nights became arenas for learning, discussion, and planning, while days were liberated for hunting, gathering, and exploration. Firelight amplified communication, enabling gestures, words, and storytelling to carry farther, fostering cohesion and shared memory. The control of flame empowered innovation, making humans architects of their surroundings rather than mere subjects of circumstance. Within the glow of hearths, the fragile population transformed necessity into mastery, vulnerability into strategy, and raw survival into an evolving culture of adaptation and foresight. Once humans harnessed fire, they claimed a measure of control over an unpredictable world, bending both physical and social environments to their advantage. The warm flicker became a repository of knowledge, a beacon of protection, and a stage for skill, innovation, and community. In these moments of illumination, the groundwork for technological evolution was laid, demonstrating that the mastery of one element could ripple across every aspect of life, transforming small, fragile clans into innovators capable of enduring and shaping the world around them. Eyes in the night. Darkness stretched over the landscape, revealing shapes that demanded careful attention and instinctive judgment. Without the guiding warmth of fire, humans relied on eyes adapted to twilight, detecting motion in shadows and gauging distance with subtle visual cues. Comparative anatomical studies indicate that rod cells, responsible for low-light vision, were densely concentrated in prehistoric human retinas, allowing heightened sensitivity to the faintest flickers of light. In these fleeting hours, perception became a tool as crucial as any spear or blade, dictating movement, strategy, and the delicate dance between predator and prey. Eyes scanned the forest floor, tracing the faintest glimmers and movements in the underbrush. Ethological evidence shows that humans adjusted their hunting patterns to exploit nocturnal behavior, often tracking animals whose vision and reactions were tuned to daylight. Human eyes, sharpened by adaptation, could detect slight contrasts in texture and shape, allowing the earliest hunters to navigate complex terrain and interpret the intentions of both animals and fellow humans. Observing distant silhouettes against dim horizons demanded an acute sense of depth and motion, honed through countless nights of survival. Rods within the retina maximized sensitivity, a biological adaptation tuned to scarce illumination and shifting shadow. Modern reconstructions suggest that these adaptations enhanced peripheral vision, enabling early humans to detect movement across a wide field while minimizing energy expenditure. The ability to see in near darkness was not only survival critical, it fostered cognitive flexibility, attention to detail, and the instinctive planning necessary for small populations to persist. Movements became deliberate, each step measured against unseen obstacles and the quiet stirrings of nocturnal life. Archaeological traces reveal careful foot placement and the creation of subtly cleared pathways near shelters, suggesting that humans actively managed their environment to maximize safety at night. Stones arranged near hearths or along paths minimized tripping hazards, while branches and undergrowth were occasionally pruned to allow better visibility. Each action reflected the intersection of cognition, memory, and environmental awareness, creating a dynamic relationship between perception and landscape management. The interplay of soft illumination of the moon and long shadows made judging distances difficult, but humans developed compensatory behaviors, slow, intentional strides, use of staff-like sticks for tactile feedback, and synchronized movement within the clan to avoid accidents. Fossilized footprints indicate that group movement often followed repeated patterns, suggesting learned, low-light pathways, while ethnographic parallels demonstrate similar strategies in modern hunter-gatherer societies. Observing animals at night also required understanding subtle visual cues, such as reflected eye shine, posture, and movement, reinforcing the integration of visual and cognitive skills. Subtle gestures, whispered tones, and the brush of a hand against a shoulder carried vital information between clan members. Communication in low-light conditions required refinement, relying on tactile, auditory, and minimal visual cues. Evidence from experimental archaeology demonstrates that early humans likely combined gestures, soft vocalizations, and shared mental maps to coordinate hunting or alert kin to danger. In the absence of firelight, these adaptive communication strategies preserved social cohesion, minimized confusion, and enhanced the effectiveness of nocturnal activities, reinforcing both survival and cultural transmission. Social memory became entwined with spatial memory, as group members learned to read each other's movements and anticipate responses in near darkness. Dim light from embers and distant stars painted dynamic gradients that the mind learned to read with precision. Shadows became indicators of movement, shapes, and potential threats. Faint glints of reflective eyes in grass signaled approaching predators. Subtle rustlings foretold animal behavior. Cognitive neuroscience suggests that the brain actively integrates these low-resolution cues with memory and inference, a process that enhances predictive modeling of the environment. In effect, darkness became a medium of knowledge, where observation, inference, and intuition combined to guide action with remarkable accuracy. Individuals learn to interpret even partial visual information, training memory and judgment through repeated nightly exposure. Small stone tools were carefully manipulated under flickering illumination, evidence of extraordinary low-light dexterity. Charred hafts, sharpened flints, and engraved objects show that precision work was possible even when firelight provided inconsistent illumination. Experimental studies indicate that humans relied on both tactile feedback and partial visual cues to fashion tools, demonstrating an interplay of sensory modalities honed by necessity. Nighttime crafting emphasized the integral role of perception in survival and technological continuity. Patterns of wear on these tools suggest that repeated nocturnal use was common, reflecting consistent adaptation to limited light conditions. Patterns of prey movement dictated timing and positioning, while predators lurked just beyond the edge of vision. Human hunting strategies became increasingly sophisticated, exploiting contrast sensitivity and motion detection in low light to anticipate prey behavior. Behavioral ecology evidence suggests that crepuscular and nocturnal hunting allowed humans to conserve energy, reduce exposure to larger daytime predators, and synchronize activity with the rhythms of local fauna. In this delicate balance, the visual system was both a shield and an instrument, mediating interaction with a world that was simultaneously familiar and alien after sunset. Mastery of perception in the darkness expanded cognitive capability, laying the foundation for advanced environmental manipulation and tool innovation. The integration of low-light vision, spatial memory, and social communication allowed humans to anticipate threats, coordinate tasks, and explore nocturnal niches previously inaccessible. Vision was not merely physiological, but cultural, shaping learning, ritual, and knowledge transfer in extended periods of illumination provided by fire or moonlight. By embracing the night, humans increased their temporal reach, expanded their opportunities for learning and experimentation, and set the stage for technological and social innovation in every subsequent domain of survival. Finally, the dark hours became a crucible for imagination and foresight. Without the distractions of daylight, humans could rehearse hunting strategies, test mental maps, and reflect on the day's observations. Shadows became teachers, embers became guides, and limited light demanded heightened awareness, memory, and inference. In these nights, cognition and perception merged, empowering humans to extend their influence over the environment and prepare for innovations that would transform their fragile existence. It is within this quiet mastery of night that the next stage of survival tools, planning, and environmental manipulation finds its roots, carrying forward the subtle ingenuity honed under stars and firelight. Stone, bone, and ingenuity. Knowledge, gleaned from nights spent observing shadows, informed the hands that shaped stone and bone, as prehistoric humans translated perception into tangible action. Each flick of a wrist, each measured strike, was guided by the memory of movement, the anticipation of force, and the subtle feedback of material resistance. Archaeological evidence shows that flint, chert, and quartz were selected with precision, their crystalline structures ideal for fracturing predictably into sharp edges. Even the smallest shards became lethal or practical instruments, their creation requiring a delicate balance of force, angle, and timing, learned through iterative experimentation and careful observation. In a world where survival depended on skill, each tool was more than a physical object. It was a repository of knowledge, experience, and foresight. Flakes of flint spiraled into patterns guided by intuition, memory, and the constraints of material physics. Microwear analysis indicates that cutting edges were maintained over long periods, with repeated resharpening demonstrating advanced planning and resource conservation. Bones of prey, antler, and driftwood were similarly modified to serve as points, awls, and digging implements, illustrating a nuanced understanding of tensile strength, elasticity, and leverage. In the dim glow of firelight, these early engineers tested angles, experimented with hafting, and refined tools through trial and error. Every strike was both functional and cognitive, embedding lessons of cause, effect, and material properties into a growing cultural memory. Residue traces reveal that early humans selectively harvested fibers, adhesives, and pigments to enhance tool efficiency. Plant resins, tree sap, and animal glue were employed to bind points to shafts, demonstrating chemical knowledge that predated formalized science by tens of thousands of years. Experiments replicating these techniques show that successful hafting required not only technical skill, but patience, precise timing, and awareness of temperature and humidity. Pigments applied to handles or blades may have served both aesthetic and symbolic purposes, encoding clan identity or ritual significance into objects that were otherwise utilitarian. In this way, tools became both instruments of survival and vessels of human expression. Sharpened antler points transformed hunting strategies, allowing the small population to compensate for limited numbers. Analysis of faunal remains indicates targeted use of projectile technology to exploit specific prey species, from swift herbivores to larger megafauna, increasing efficiency while minimizing exposure to predators. The integration of bone, stone, and wood enabled compound tools that could penetrate hides, dislodge deep roots, or break apart hardened nuts, illustrating early problem-solving at the intersection of biology, physics, and ecology. With each innovation, humans extended their physical reach and influence over the landscape, effectively turning limited bodies into amplified agents of survival. Experimental replication shows that toolmaking required sustained attention, sequencing of steps, and cooperative instruction. Observations of ethnographic hunter-gatherer societies suggest that skills were transmitted orally and visually, often in shared workspaces near hearths or shelters. Teaching involved demonstration, correction, and iterative practice, while learners internalized both technical procedures and the embedded knowledge of environmental cues. In this way, cognitive capacities for memory, planning, and abstract thought were reinforced, with every object carrying lessons from prior generations. The act of crafting became inseparable from social cohesion, embedding survival skills within the cultural fabric of small clans. scraping, grinding, and notching produced implements suited for cutting, digging, and processing both plant and animal resources. Soil microlayers show concentrations of debris from repeated tool production, indicating the presence of dedicated work areas. Experimental archaeology reveals that the efficiency of these tools relied on ergonomic considerations: handles shaped to reduce fatigue, edges angled to optimize cutting, and weights balanced to control force. These refinements demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of mechanics and human physiology, reflecting an early form of engineering that transformed everyday survival into a disciplined practice, where marks and polished patterns indicate extended use and maintenance, suggesting planning, foresight, and resource conservation. Tools were not disposable. They were repaired, repurposed, and adapted to new challenges. Obsidian blades, for instance, were sometimes resharpened dozens of times, with evidence of incremental modifications enhancing performance over months or years. Similarly, bone awls and points reveal signs of repeated use, reshaping, and reinforcement, highlighting the interplay of innovation and preservation. Humans treated tools as dynamic entities, responsive to need and evolving alongside their creator's understanding of the environment. Each crafted object carried knowledge, embodying the intersection of observation, experimentation, and tactile skill. Through touch, humans refined techniques, gauged force, and developed a kinesthetic memory as sophisticated as any visual or verbal system. Cognitive science suggests that this embodied learning reinforced neural pathways related to problem-solving, coordination, and planning. Tools became extensions of the mind and body, translating intention into effect with a precision that belied the simplicity of their raw materials. In wielding these objects, humans not only manipulated their surroundings, but also internalized strategies that would inform generations to come. Tools reshaped the perception of risk and opportunity, allowing humans to manipulate environments in ways previously impossible. By creating spears, digging implements, and cutting tools, humans could access food sources that were otherwise unattainable, defend against predators, and construct shelters with greater efficiency. Archaeobotanical evidence shows that tools facilitated plant processing, seed grinding, and root extraction, expanding dietary options and nutritional security. The capacity to reshape the environment also reduced dependence on chance encounters, allowing humans to plan, predict, and exploit patterns in both flora and fauna. Survival became a function not only of observation, but of manipulation, preparation, and ingenuity. In mastering stone and bone, humans not only enhanced survival, but also codified a culture of ingenuity, laying the groundwork for ecological and medicinal understanding. Tool use intersected with knowledge of plants, animal behavior, and seasonal cycles, forming a feedback loop in which observation, experimentation, and implementation reinforced each other. Clans preserved and transmitted this knowledge, embedding practical lessons into social memory, ritual practice, and the very rhythms of daily life. Through tools, humans extended their agency across time and space, translating fragile physical presence into enduring capability. After meticulous work, each object, sharpened, hafted, or polished, bore the mark of human intellect and creativity. These implements were far more than survival aids. They were proof of adaptation, experimentation, and foresight. In every strike, scrape, and notch, humans wrote a language of mastery into stone, bone, and wood, a language that allowed them to manipulate the earth, safeguard life, and prepare for innovations yet to come. As they honed these tools, humans not only expanded their physical reach, but also cultivated a cognitive and cultural inheritance that would prepare them to explore ecological knowledge, medicinal practices, and the deeper mysteries of their fragile world. The healing hands of prehistory. Insight into the natural world guided hands toward leaves, roots, and resins, whose properties could mend or soothe, as prehistoric humans translated observation into tangible care. Each selection was deliberate, drawn from careful study of texture, color, aroma, and seasonal availability, alongside subtle cues gleaned from trial and error. Archaeological findings reveal residues of bitter-tasting compounds and aromatic oils on tools, suggesting systematic processing of plants, such as yarrow for wound healing, willow bark for pain relief, and nettle for anti-inflammatory purposes. Even in the absence of written records, the marks left on grinding stones, mortars, and implements speak to meticulous attention paid to dosage, preparation, and application. In a population so small, every successful remedy could mean the difference between survival and extinction, embedding empirical knowledge into the social memory of the clan and shaping the biological resilience of each individual. Bruised and powdered plants were tested cautiously, their efficacy observed over hours and days, while healers monitored subtle changes in vitality, wound closure, and behavioral indicators. Some trials were accidental, leaves rubbed on minor cuts, roots chewed to alleviate discomfort, or resins applied as protective coatings. Over time, repeated observation allowed early humans to distinguish beneficial effects from neutral or harmful outcomes, developing an empirical framework that guided subsequent generations. Ethnobotanical parallels show that such experimentation required acute sensory perception, patience, and the ability to infer causal relationships from nuanced physiological responses, suggesting that the foundations of early pharmacology were born from careful attention and sustained observation. Phytochemical remnants in prehistoric tools suggest deliberate extraction and preparation of compounds, rather than incidental contact. Microanalysis of grinding stones, wooden mortars, and stone scrapers reveals traces of alkaloids, saponins, and tannins consistent with medicinal usage, not dietary intake. The selection of specific plants in particular seasons underscores an understanding of potency, growth cycles, and ecological distribution. Archaeobotanical studies indicate that storage and preservation methods, drying leaves, grinding roots, and sealing resins, were employed to maintain efficacy across months. This knowledge reflected a deep integration of environment, biology, and timing, demonstrating an advanced cognitive engagement with the landscape and a sophisticated interplay between humans and plants. Some preparations appear to have combined multiple ingredients, hinting at empirical experimentation akin to early pharmacology. Combinations of leaves, roots, and resins were applied together, producing synergistic effects that enhanced healing or alleviated discomfort. Modern chemical studies support the efficacy of many prehistoric plant compounds, confirming that these early humans had identified, through observation and experience, remedies whose active constituents influence inflammation, pain perception, and microbial inhibition. This layered understanding of interactions between natural compounds marks an early stage in the evolution of experimental science and underscores the capacity of humans to reason and plan beyond immediate survival. The transmission of this knowledge depended on memory, storytelling, and hands-on apprenticeship within tightly knit clans. Elders demonstrated techniques, while younger members replicated them under careful supervision, learning to identify, prepare, and apply medicinal plants. Oral instruction included warnings, observations, and subtle indicators, encoding the cumulative wisdom of trial, success, and failure. Social cooperation was essential. Each act of healing was not only practical, but also a reinforcement of trust, reciprocity, and interdependence. In small populations, such fidelity was critical, as the loss of a healer could imperil the health and continuity of the entire group. Chemical analysis of dental calculus indicates consumption of bitter or aromatic plants with medicinal rather than nutritional value, providing a biological record of deliberate treatment practices. Evidence of compounds with antiparasitic, analgesic, or anti-inflammatory properties suggests that early humans understood both the immediate effects of a remedy and its longer-term impact on systemic health. Traces of chewed leaves, resins, and seeds indicate internal administration, while external applications point to strategies for wound care, skin infections, and burns. Such findings illustrate that prehistoric medicine was deliberate, empirical, and adaptive, integrating cognition, observation, and cultural memory into a holistic approach to survival. Inspired by the actions of animals, observation extended beyond humans, as animal behavior often inspired experimentation with specific flora or minerals. Tracking the ingestion habits of herbivores, noting self-medication behaviors in primates, and understanding the relationships between diet, health, and habitat informed the selection of candidate plants for human use. These insights highlight the deep ecological literacy required to identify effective remedies in a world without formal instruction, textbooks, or laboratories. Humans became both students and experimenters within the broader ecosystem, learning from its inhabitants while shaping their own survival strategies. Environmental knowledge, seasonality, habitat, and plant maturation dictated the timing and availability of remedies. Certain roots or leaves were harvested only when mature, resins collected during specific temperature cycles, and flowers gathered at peak potency. Microstratigraphy in excavation sites shows repeated storage and careful layering of plant materials, suggesting foresight and planning. Humans combined environmental awareness with tool use to access, process, and conserve medicinal resources, transforming the landscape into both a pharmacy and a laboratory, where knowledge of plants, seasons, and habitats became an indispensable component of survival. Tools crafted for processing, grinding, and applying compounds show adaptation of physical ingenuity to biological mastery. Mortars, pestles, scrapers, and sharpened sticks enabled precise preparation, allowing powdered leaves, pastes, or poultices to be applied effectively. The techniques required dexterity, coordination, and a tactile understanding of materials, echoing the skills developed in earlier chapters of toolmaking for hunting and construction. In combining tools with medicinal practice, prehistoric humans extended the reach of their knowledge and ensured the reliability of remedies, demonstrating a convergence of physical and cognitive ingenuity, where observation, dexterity, and environmental literacy intertwined. Having stabilized life through physical remedies, humans turned attention to the intangible, the mental, and spiritual scaffolds that would shape culture and belief. Ritualized application of medicine, storytelling around healing practices, and symbolic associations between plants and spirits created frameworks that reinforced both memory and social cohesion. Medicine became inseparable from culture, embedding empirical knowledge within moral, social, and spiritual contexts. This duality of observation and ritual prepared humans not only to preserve life, but also to invest it with meaning, shaping collective identity and resilience in a world of scarcity and uncertainty, setting the stage for the next chapter, exploring the rites, myths, and narratives that anchored their fragile existence. Rituals of the Edge. From the echoes of whispered instruction and shared stories, humans began to choreograph acts that transcended necessity. Beyond the immediate demands of food, shelter, and protection, they turned toward the intangible, a world of symbolism, ritual, and collective memory. Ochre-stained hands traced patterns into stone and soil, leaving vivid impressions that spoke of presence, identity, and intention. These marks were neither arbitrary nor decorative alone. They codified experience, encoded social knowledge, and marked the fragile continuity of life amidst a world of precarious survival. Each pigment, each carefully arranged arrangement of stone or bone, was a deliberate act of reflection, connecting the living with the dead, the seen with the unseen, and the fleeting with the enduring. The positions of the dead, carefully arranged in shallow graves or natural depressions, reveal a deep understanding of reverence and continuity. Bodies were often placed with limbs folded or arms crossed, sometimes accompanied by tools, stones, or plant material, suggesting that early humans acknowledged both the corporeal and symbolic aspects of death. Microscopic analysis of soil surrounding these burials has revealed traces of pigments and resins, indicating that even at this fragile moment, attention was paid to ritualized preservation. This evidence demonstrates that small clans were capable not only of practical survival, but also of abstract thought, the ability to process grief, and the foresight to embed meaning into acts of mortality practices that reinforced cohesion and transmitted values across generations. Objects placed within ritual contexts carried significance that transcended their materiality. Stones selected for color or shape, animal bones arranged in deliberate patterns, and fragments of ochre or charcoal all conveyed messages of identity, status, or intention. Experimental archaeology suggests that the act of arranging, combining, and presenting these items required planning, memory, and a shared understanding of symbolic language. Even minor variations in placement or sequence could communicate subtle distinctions about clan membership, hierarchy, or spiritual belief. In a population numbering in the mere hundreds, such practices serve not only as markers of tradition, but also as tools of social organization, reinforcing bonds between individuals and solidifying collective memory in a form more enduring than speech alone. Synchronization of movement, chant, and gesture became central to the performance of ritual. Across open plains, along riverbanks, or in shadowed caves, groups would align bodies, voices, and actions in ways that transcended ordinary daily activity. This coordination strengthened social cohesion, enabling humans to communicate shared values and expectations even without fully formalized language. Neuroarchaeological studies suggest that repetitive rhythmic activity, whether in drumming, clapping, or chanting, activated neurological pathways associated with trust, empathy, and group identity. Through these practices, humans cultivated not only psychological resilience, but also a mechanism for embedding norms and reinforcing cooperation, crucial for survival in a precarious world. Seasonal and environmental cycles shaped the timing and content of ceremonies. The rising and setting sun, lunar phases, and the movements of herds dictated the rhythm of ritual activity. Observations of plant phenology and animal behavior informed the optimal periods for conducting ceremonies, aligning human practice with the natural order. Archaeological layers indicate repeated use of specific sites across years, suggesting that humans recognized the significance of place and season in anchoring memory and cultural practice. In a world where survival depended on acute environmental awareness, the interweaving of ritual and ecology demonstrates the sophistication of early cognition and the deep integration of human life with the land itself. The process of ritual was as much about mental and emotional processing as it was about social reinforcement. Through collective enactments, whether mourning the dead, celebrating successful hunts, or marking seasonal transitions, humans created shared frameworks for interpreting the unpredictability of their environment. Ethnographic analogues show that such practices reduce anxiety, strengthen cohesion, and provide a narrative through which small groups could make sense of suffering, scarcity, and mortality. In the prehistoric context, where each loss was magnified by tiny population numbers, ritual provided a vital cognitive and emotional tool, transforming trauma into meaning and reinforcing adaptive social structures. Evidence of symbolic innovation extends to the manipulation of materials themselves. Charcoal, ochre, feathers, and shells were incorporated into ceremonial contexts, often modified with incisions, polishes, or arrangements suggesting deliberate aesthetic choices. Chemical residue analyses demonstrate that pigments were not simply applied randomly. They were carefully processed and combined to achieve desired hues, textures, and adherence. These acts required planning, manual dexterity, and shared understanding, all of which reflect a cognitive sophistication previously unappreciated in small prehistoric populations. The physical labor of preparing ritual materials, combined with their deliberate deployment, illustrates the interconnectedness of practical skill, observation, and symbolic thought. Even in the most constrained social networks, these ceremonies fostered resilience. By codifying shared practices, early humans created frameworks for identity, memory, and responsibility. Rituals preserved knowledge of kinship, resource locations, hunting strategies, and environmental cues, embedding them in acts of repetition and observation. This blending of empirical knowledge with symbolic expression ensured that even in times of fragmentation, clans retained cohesion, cultural continuity, and a sense of purpose. Anthropological comparisons suggest that such practices likely reduced conflict, reinforced alliances, and mitigated the psychological toll of living on the edge of extinction. During such observances, the interplay between space, action, and meaning was fundamental to these practices. Sites chosen for ritual caves, groves, riverbanks were imbued with significance. Their natural features integrated into ceremonial choreography. Sunlight filtering through openings, echoes in stone chambers, or reflections on water may have amplified the sensory and emotional impact, linking perception with narrative. Archaeologists have noted repeated placement of items along natural lines, such as rock edges or stream courses, indicating an intentional use of landscape as a medium for expression. These deliberate spatial arrangements transformed the environment into a canvas, where human creativity, social memory, and environmental awareness converged. Through ritual, prehistoric humans reconciled the tension between fragility and endurance. Every act, from the smallest gesture to elaborate sequences, reinforced trust, conveyed identity, and encoded survival knowledge. In performing these symbolic behaviors, humans externalized memory, processed fear, and solidified the social glue necessary for collective resilience. The line between practicality and meaning blurred, as ceremonies became a mechanism for both psychological stability and the reinforcement of cooperative strategies that directly affected survival outcomes. In this fusion of observation, cognition, and symbolism, the seeds of culture and identity were sown, creating a blueprint for human perseverance in the face of near extinction. Emerging from these edge ceremonies, humans carried forward lessons that transcended survival alone. The deliberate coordination of act, sound, and place cultivated a sense of continuity, anchoring the fleeting present in collective memory and preparing the mind for the challenges of an unpredictable world. As clans emerged from ritualized space into the daily demands of the land, they carried with them not only knowledge of the tangible plants, prey, tools, but also an inheritance of shared identity, resilience, and the capacity to endure. This intimate connection between culture and survival naturally leads to the mastery of the environment itself, where understanding, manipulation, and observation become the final frontier in ensuring the persistence of fragile humanity. Reading the seasons. As winter's grip loosened, humans tracked the faint emergence of green along riverbanks, a signal that prey and edible plants would soon return. The land itself spoke in subtle shifts, the first tendrils of frost-free soil, the delicate stirrings of insects, the trembling buds on birch and willow. Each observation was catalogued mentally, encoded into the survival strategies of fragile clans, whose numbers magnified the consequences of error. Analysis of sediment layers from ancient floodplains reveals the precision with which early humans timed their movements, synchronizing with the seasonal abundance of plants, game, and freshwater access. A single miscalculation could mean hunger or exposure, yet in these precise acts of reading the land, humans transformed uncertainty into actionable knowledge. Cloud formations and wind direction became guides, informing movement across hills, plains, and dense forests with a subtle intelligence honed over generations. Paleoclimatic data show that even slight shifts in monsoon patterns or storm frequency required recalibration of foraging and hunting schedules, while isotopic analysis of prey teeth reveals predictable migratory windows that humans exploited for sustenance. Within these patterns lay a delicate balance, understanding when to strike, when to follow, and when to retreat. Every step across the landscape was informed by observation, memory, and foresight, as humans translated environmental signals into strategies that would preserve life, teach the young, and safeguard scarce resources. Early footprints preserved in frozen mud and compacted earth demonstrate remarkable synchronization in group movement, suggesting coordinated planning to maximize success during brief windows of abundance. Archaeological evidence of tool caches, butchered animal remains, and hearth arrangements supports the conclusion that humans followed cyclical patterns of habitation and hunting. Campsites shifted, not randomly but according to repeated, environmentally dictated logic, a choreography of survival etched into the soil and sediment of the world. Observing these patterns across multiple sites, researchers can reconstruct not only human movement, but the rhythm of a society whose life was inseparable from the pulse of the land. Observing the celestial arc, humans noted subtle shifts in daylight and star positions, embedding astronomical knowledge into seasonal planning. Lunar phases dictated the timing of night hunts, while the movement of constellations and the angle of the rising sun informed planting, gathering, and migration schedules. Ethnographic parallels suggest that such observations were likely transmitted orally through narrative and ritual, creating cultural memory that preserved life-saving ecological intelligence. Through these early astronomical cues, humans developed a conceptual framework for anticipating change, linking the heavens to the earth in a practical system of survival. The timing of birthing cycles in prey species dictated hunting strategies, ensuring food while preserving herds for future survival. Fossilized remains reveal that humans selectively targeted juveniles and weak adults, maximizing caloric intake while maintaining herd viability. Tracking birth seasons required patience, acute observation, and long-term memory, as well as an understanding of predator-prey dynamics. Humans honed the ability to predict when and where herds would gather, learning the interdependencies between rainfall, vegetation, and animal behavior. In these calculations, survival became a dynamic negotiation with the natural world rather than mere confrontation. Accumulated knowledge of flood patterns, droughts, and river behavior allowed clans to anticipate danger and seek safe passages. Stratigraphic studies indicate that early humans settled temporary campsites above floodplains, yet close enough to exploit water resources. Seasonal planning encompassed not only sustenance but also safety, requiring careful reading of cloud formations, soil moisture, and animal behaviors that hinted at impending storms. The smallest cues, bent reeds, displaced stones, or unusual bird calls could indicate a shift in conditions, transforming ephemeral observation into survival-critical foresight. The sensory acuity required to read the landscape extended beyond sight, incorporating smell, sound, and subtle ecological cues. Archaeobotanical analysis of foraging sites indicates that humans differentiated edible plants, ripeness stages, and toxicity levels through tactile and olfactory assessment. Listening for the distant cry of migratory herds, detecting the faint musky scent of a predator, or feeling temperature gradients in soil all contributed to a nuanced understanding of temporal and spatial patterns. In mastering these senses, humans achieved a form of ecological literacy, translating perception into effective action. In combining empirical observation with memory, humans converted fleeting environmental data into long-term survival strategies. Each clan developed a mental map of territories, migratory corridors, and seasonal resources, a living atlas updated year after year. Evidence from faunal remains, pollen analysis, and hearth positioning suggests that humans revisited familiar routes, optimized resource acquisition, and anticipated scarcity with remarkable accuracy. The integration of experience, experimentation, and intergenerational knowledge formed a cognitive scaffolding for survival, allowing humans to project into future seasons and plan accordingly. Each movement across territory reflected a complex calculus of resource distribution, weather, and social coordination. Ethnographic studies of modern foraging societies suggest that leaders, scouts, or experienced hunters interpreted subtle environmental cues to inform group decisions. Collaborative deliberation balanced risk and reward, ensuring that fragile human populations could navigate landscapes teeming with predators, unpredictable weather, and variable food availability. Human survival became a living negotiation with ecological reality, one in which every action carried consequences for the immediate clan and the species itself. Humans, having mastered these recurring patterns, endured while simultaneously paving the way for innovation and more intentional control of their environment. The intimate understanding of seasonal rhythms allowed experimentation with storage, selective harvesting, and controlled movement that would evolve into broader technological and social innovations. In observing the Earth's cycles, humans cultivated patience, precision, and resilience, qualities that transformed ephemeral survival into sustained existence. These lessons, hard-won over millennia, ensured that the fragile flicker of humanity could persist, adapt, and ultimately thrive, despite the precarity of numbers and the capriciousness of nature. Seeds of the future. From the understanding of seasonal cycles, emerged the first deliberate interventions in the soil, as humans experimented with planting and preserving select foods. The knowledge accumulated over countless generations when to harvest, which tubers would endure frost, and how to store seeds safely translated into small, intentional acts of control. Each decision carried immense weight. A misjudged planting could mean hunger for the entire clan, while a successful harvest offered not only nutrition, but a rare, precious assurance that the fragile flicker of humanity could endure. Archaeobotanical studies indicate that even at this precarious population level, humans were favoring certain wild cereals, legumes, and tubers, selecting for reliability and resilience rather than sheer abundance, demonstrating a nascent understanding of sustainable practice long before formal agriculture would arise. Within small, fragile clans, every seed gathered held both sustenance and possibility, creating subtle links between the present and an imagined future. Clans experimented with temporary storage pits, hidden caches, and raised platforms to protect these vital resources from scavenging animals, moisture, and decay. Microscopic analysis of sediment layers at Pleistocene sites reveals repeated patterns of seed deposition, suggesting not random disposal but intentional organization and retrieval over multiple seasons. These practices were far from casual. They required careful observation, planning, and cooperation, integrating ecological knowledge with social discipline. Even the smallest tuber or grain carried the weight of survival, an intimate intersection of biology, environment, and foresight. Observations of wild plants and their growth cycles informed deliberate selection, demonstrating an early understanding of germination, soil types, and moisture patterns. Seeds from species with predictable yields were preferred, indicating humans recognized patterns in plant phenology and reliability. For instance, certain geophytes that emerged at consistent intervals were harvested and stored for future use, their success directly influencing clan movement and settlement choices. Ethnobotanical parallels suggest that humans also identified plants with dual purposes: nutritional value coupled with medicinal or preservative properties, creating multifunctional resource strategies. These intertwined observations formed the foundation of ecological literacy, a cognitive leap in anticipating nature's fluctuations rather than merely reacting to them. Hearths became dual-purpose spaces, both for cooking and for drying or storing plant matter, revealing sophisticated spatial organization and foresight. Controlled fires not only improved the palatability of certain tubers, but also extended their shelf life by reducing moisture and killing pathogens. Experimental archaeology supports the idea that small heat-treated caches could maintain viability for weeks or months, bridging seasonal gaps when fresh resources were scarce. The proximity of storage to hearths allowed for quick monitoring, reinforcing feedback between preparation and consumption. Within these domestic microenvironments, humans were cultivating not just nourishment, but predictive mastery over the cycles of availability and decay. Trial and error extended beyond planting to protection, as seeds and tubers were hidden, buried, or elevated to avoid predation by rodents, birds, or other mammals. Evidence of shallow pits, layered coverings, and sometimes even small protective structures suggests that early humans applied inventive problem-solving to safeguard the results of labor-intensive foraging. Failure was as instructive as success. Spoiled caches or depleted supplies provided the basis for refining techniques, such as selecting drier soils, choosing different species, or altering burial depth. Each experiment contributed to a growing body of knowledge, encoded in memory, shared stories, and repeated practice across seasons. Coordination within clans amplified success, with members assigned tasks for planting, monitoring, and retrieval in rhythm with seasonal patterns. This collaborative effort ensured that no single individual bore the full responsibility of preservation, and it reinforced social cohesion while optimizing survival outcomes. Archaeological evidence suggests synchronized labor cycles, with groups moving collectively to planting or harvesting sites, guided by observation of environmental cues. Beyond the practical, these shared responsibilities likely reinforced cultural norms, teaching younger members the intimate rhythms of ecological systems and instilling early concepts of stewardship and collective foresight. Repeated cycles of harvesting, storing, and replanting indicate that humans were not merely consumers of the environment, but early managers, embedding ecological knowledge into practice. Pollen analysis, carbon dating of seed layers, and phytolith studies all point to deliberate interventions that improved yields or storage potential. By recognizing patterns in germination, soil fertility, and seasonal rainfall, humans were effectively experimenting with proto-agriculture. These subtle acts of control required patience, observation, and precise timing, reflecting an emerging understanding of cause, effect, and consequence in natural systems. Even minor failures, preserved in soil strata or plant remains, informed future strategies, creating a feedback loop of experimentation and adaptation. Lessons derived from spoiled caches or poorly timed harvests were incorporated into subsequent planning, demonstrating the iterative nature of early survival innovation. This continuous refinement shows that humans were cultivating resilience as much as sustenance, building both ecological literacy and cultural memory simultaneously. In this way, knowledge became tangible, encoded in the land itself, and passed across generations through example, demonstration, and oral instruction. In these measured acts, humans glimpsed control over the uncertain world, transforming mortality and scarcity into opportunities for learning and foresight. The intentional handling of seeds, the safeguarding of stores, and the careful observation of plant life exemplified an emerging philosophy. Survival required both attentiveness to immediate needs and investment in the future. These early experiments did more than ensure that a handful of humans persisted. They planted the intellectual and practical seeds for civilization itself. By coupling ecological knowledge with social coordination, humans carved a fragile but enduring niche in a world of immense unpredictability, shaping the trajectory of life that would continue long after their small numbers had grown. Through soil, seed, and season, humans learned the power of patience, observation, and anticipation. Each planting and storage practice reflected not just necessity, but the capacity to project into the future, to imagine sustenance yet to come, and to balance risk against opportunity. In these intimate acts, the first glimpses of agriculture, planning, and resource management took root, demonstrating that even the most vulnerable population could leave an indelible mark on the earth. From here, the story moves onward to the delicate interplay of social behavior and migration, as humans, acutely aware of their mortality, continued to shape both environment and destiny in the final crucible of their survival, echoes of a vanishing world. Having shaped soil and seed, humans now confronted the delicate tension between survival and extinction, each choice laden with consequence. The landscapes they inhabited, stretching from frost-bound plains to dense, shadowed forests, were simultaneously arenas of sustenance and sites of relentless risk. Hearths still smouldered where small groups had once sheltered, and the scattered remnants of tools worn smooth by constant use, whispered of ingenuity pressed into the service of survival. These tangible traces, while modest, reveal a species exercising foresight and experimentation despite its vulnerability, navigating a world that offered no guarantees. Each observation, from the migration of herds to the flowering of specific plants, was catalogued in memory and shared through social practice, creating a living record of knowledge essential for continued existence. Traces of their presence, charred hearths, discarded tools, and scattered seeds testify to ingenuity pressed into a precarious existence. Archaeological layers show patterns of resource management, indicating that even in the face of scarcity, humans experimented with storage, selective harvesting, and the careful positioning of shelters. Microbotanical evidence, including phytoliths and pollen, suggests that some early plants were cultivated, or at least tended to, hinting at intentional modification of the environment. Fire was not only a source of warmth but a method for soil treatment, cooking, and protection, demonstrating that these fragile populations understood the interplay between energy, matter, and survival. Population bottlenecks, inferred from genetic studies, reveal that the survival of a few individuals carried the weight of an entire species. DNA analyses indicate that humans during this period may have numbered only in the low thousands, a precarious existence, leaving populations vulnerable to disease, environmental shifts, and random catastrophe. Each birth, each survival, was therefore not just a personal event, but a critical contribution to the continuation of humanity itself. In this context, cooperation and careful management of resources were more than advantageous. They were existential imperatives encoded in both culture and biology. In the shadows of their fragile world, humans discovered innovation not as convenience but as necessity, crafting social bonds that became lifelines. Collaboration on hunts, sharing of resources, and coordinated shelter construction all required trust and the transmission of knowledge across individuals and generations. Such acts of interdependence formed the scaffolding upon which resilience could grow, allowing the species to maintain continuity despite the constant threat of annihilation. Archaeological evidence of group burials, communal hearths, and overlapping habitation zones reflects the depth of this social integration, revealing that cohesion itself was a tool of survival. Every act of cooperation, from shared labour to the protection of vulnerable members, left subtle fingerprints on both culture and ecology. Selective gathering, careful tracking of animal migrations, and management of fire for both warmth and ecosystem control illustrate a species negotiating with its habitat rather than dominating it outright. The resulting patterns in sediment layers, pollen records, and faunal remains provide insight into a deliberate rhythm of adaptation where humans acted with measured foresight, balancing immediate need with long-term sustainability. Their choices created feedback loops. Survival informed knowledge, knowledge informed action, and action ensured the continuation of the fragile population. Pollen records, phytoliths, and sedimentary layers document deliberate environmental management, hinting at early experimentation and foresight. Seeds found in middens show selective preservation, indicating that humans may have anticipated scarcity and planned for the coming seasons. Hearth ash composition demonstrates strategic use of plant materials not only for fuel, but for controlling insect populations and enhancing soil fertility. These tangible interventions in the environment reflect a cognitive leap, the ability to project consequences, modify surroundings, and manipulate resources in ways that preserved both body and community. Encounters with predators and rival clans reinforced caution, teaching lessons encoded in behavior, memory, and story. Bones bear the scars of both animal and human conflict, while subtle shifts in settlement patterns suggest strategic retreats, ambushes, and protective positioning. Observing predator behavior informed both hunting strategies and nighttime vigilance, while interactions with neighboring human groups demanded negotiation, alliance, and occasionally conflict management. In this interplay of threat and adaptation, humanity honed not only physical skills, but social intelligence, creating patterns of behavior that would echo across millennia. Even failures, spoilt caches, abandoned settlements, and lost individuals contributed to the collective understanding of survival. Such losses, painstakingly recorded in the fabric of culture, informed future strategies, teaching caution, innovation, and the importance of redundancy. Humans learn to anticipate environmental variability, diversify their food sources, and rotate campsites to mitigate risk. These adaptive measures were iterative, combining trial, observation, and communication into a sophisticated, though fragile, system of ecological mastery. Their footprints, often erased by time, linger in genetic patterns that trace human migration, diversity, and adaptation. Isotopic analyses of skeletal remains indicate dietary flexibility, mobility across vast territories, and resilience in the face of climatic extremes. Subtle variations in tool design, hearth construction, and plant usage document an ongoing dialogue with the environment, revealing a species constantly recalibrating its relationship with the earth. As the last echoes of these fragile populations reverberated through the landscape, humanity's capacity for creativity, foresight, and resilience became an enduring testament to survival against near extinction. The fragile threads, woven by clans, fire, tools, and cultivated plants, formed a lattice that supported life, knowledge, and culture in a precarious world. In soil, stone, and memory, traces remain of a species acutely aware of mortality, yet determined to endure. These echoes invite reflection on the extraordinary combination of vulnerability and brilliance that defined humans during this crucible of existence, bridging the gap between the last flickers of prehistoric survival and the future expansions that would eventually repopulate and reshape the planet. In contemplating these remnants, viewers are left to ponder the enduring consequences of near extinction, how fragility forged resilience, and how every small act of adaptation carried the weight of an entire species, leaving hints of both survival and profound loss for generations yet to come. In the quiet aftermath of near extinction, the fragile flicker of humanity endured, shaped by ingenuity, resilience, and the bonds that tethered individuals to one another. Each footprint, fire-scorched stone, and whispered lesson bore witness to a species learning not just to survive, but to imagine a future beyond peril. Across frozen plains and shadowed forests, life persisted in defiance of fragility, leaving traces that would echo through millennia. In this delicate balance between vulnerability and hope, we glimpse the enduring spirit that allowed humanity to rise again. If you enjoyed this exploration, consider liking, subscribing, or leaving a comment below.